The morning Marcus Cole got turned away at the gates of Ridgeline Auto Auction, he had exactly $43 in his wallet, a 9-year-old girl asleep in the passenger seat with crayon smears on her jacket sleeve, and a mind that could hear what was wrong with an engine the way a musician hears a note played flat. He had driven 40 minutes in the dark to get there. He had ironed his shirt. He had rehearsed what he was going to say. None of it mattered. The man at the gate, a broad-shouldered facility manager named Ted, whose whole personality lived somewhere between indifferent and hostile, looked at Marcus's application, looked at Marcus, looked back at the application, and then said 3 words with the particular brand of casual cruelty that comes naturally to people who have never had to fight for a room they deserve to be in. Not a fit. No explanation. No follow-up. Just the clipboard snapped shut, and the gate swinging back closed like Marcus was a draft of cold air that needed to be sealed out. Behind him in the parking lot, the real dealers were pulling in with their press lanyards and their company trucks, laughing in clusters, treating a Tuesday morning like a social event, because for them, it was. For them, everything was easy. The auction was their country club, and the admission was a credential Marcus didn't have, couldn't buy, and had just been told he never would. He walked back to his truck. He sat in the driver's seat. Zoe was still asleep, mouth slightly open, one hand curled around the worn ear of a stuffed dog she'd had since she was 4. He looked at her for a long moment. He did not slam the door. He did not grip the wheel until his knuckles went white. He turned the key in the ignition, pulled out of the lot with the same composure he used when he was diagnosing a complicated electrical fault, quiet, patient, already working the problem. What Ted at the gate didn't know, what none of the men laughing in that parking lot could have known, was that Marcus Cole had just been handed the single worst professional humiliation of his adult life and turned it into rocket fuel. He was going to burn the whole sky with it. And the fire was going to start with 47 rusting cars that no one else on earth wanted to touch. To understand what happened next, you have to understand who Marcus was before that gate closed in his face. He grew up in a small industrial town in eastern Ohio, the son of a man who fixed other people's machines for a living and believed that the most honest thing a person could do was to learn how something worked and then keep it working. His father owned a single-bay garage with a hand-painted sign that had been weathering since 1987. The sign said Coles in faded red letters, and Marcus had spent every summer of his childhood under that sign with his hands inside engines that smelled like oil and heat and the particular mechanical intimacy of things that run when they have been understood. He was not a prodigy in the flashy sense of the word. He wasn't building engines at age 8 or winning science competitions. What he had was quieter and more durable than that. He had patience. He had the ability to listen to a machine the way you listen to someone telling you something important without rushing to the next sentence. A skip in the idle, a drag in the power steering, a vibration that came in not at low RPM, but at exactly 62 miles per hour, and only when the cab temperature was above 80 degrees. Marcus heard things other mechanics had to be told to look for. He joined a fleet maintenance company at 22, worked his way to lead mechanic in 3 years. By 30, he was running diagnostics on entire commercial fleets, 60, 70 vehicles at a stretch, and his error rate was so low that his supervisor had taken to calling him the machine whisperer in a tone that was half joke and half actual reverence. Then life happened in the way that life sometimes happens, not gradually and philosophically, but fast and permanent. His wife, Dina, died from a brain aneurysm when Zoe was 2 years old. Here one afternoon, gone the following morning, with no warning and no script for what came after. Marcus took every bit of grief he had, every dark and incomprehensible thing that tried to come apart inside him, and he sealed it behind the only wall he knew how to build, which was work. He worked. He raised Zoe. He cooked dinner at 6 every evening and packed her lunch every morning and helped her with second-grade math at the kitchen table with the same focused attention he brought to a compression test. He was 38 years old when he walked up to the Ridgeline gate that Tuesday. No company behind him, no dealer license in his pocket, just 7 years of fleet experience, a particular brain that could see value where other people saw junk, and a daughter asleep in the passenger seat who deserved a bigger life than what his current paycheck could build her. He had not gone to Ridgeline looking for a miracle. He had gone looking for a job, a position as an on-lot mechanic or an assessment consultant, something that would let him use his skills inside the auction world he'd spent months studying from the outside. He had read every forum, every trade publication, every dealer debrief he could find online. He understood the architecture of the business. He understood the margins. He understood, perhaps better than most people walking through those gates with their lanyards, exactly which cars on any given lot were sleeping giants and which were dressed-up disasters. He'd gone to Ridgeline because Ridgeline was the biggest dealer auction in a 3-state region. 400 vehicles on a good week. A clientele that ranged from independent used car lots to regional fleet buyers. He had written a letter. He had attached his credentials. He had followed up once and been told to come in on Tuesday. And Ted at the gate had looked at all of that and said, not a fit. What Ted was really saying was, you don't look like the rest of these people. And he was right. Marcus didn't. He arrived alone, without the company truck or the lanyard or the manufactured ease of men whose professional identity came pre-assembled. He arrived with his own hands and his own mind and his daughter sleeping in the cab. And in the economy of quick judgments, that wasn't the picture that said dealer network. It was, however, the exact picture that was about to rearrange the entire lot. His friend Sal Greco called him at 10 that morning while Marcus was parked at a gas station off Route 9, eating a gas station sandwich and thinking. Sal was 45 years old, built like a man who had been loading heavy things onto trucks for 20 years because that was exactly what he had been doing. He drove a flatbed hauler for private sellers and had been Marcus's closest friend since they met at a parts supplier 8 years ago and spent 40 minutes arguing about whether a 2003 Chevy Silverado with a ticking knock was fixable without a full engine swap. It was. Marcus fixed it. Sal bought him a beer. They had been friends ever since. You get the job? Sal asked. Didn't even get inside the building, Marcus said. A pause on the line. You're kidding me. The guy at the gate said, quote, not a fit. Not a fit, Sal repeated slowly, in the tone of a man holding something and deciding how to put it down. What does that even mean? Not a fit for what? For the kind of people they let inside, I think. Another pause. Then Sal said, there's a lot over in Galloway. County impound contractor just lost their storage contract. They've got 47 vehicles, maybe more, sitting in a field. They're selling the whole batch wholesale to clear the space. Heard it this morning on the radio. Starting price is $3,000. Marcus stopped chewing. For the whole lot. For everything on the property. Titles included, but some are salvage. Condition unknown on most of them. Nobody's gone to look because nobody thinks there's anything worth looking at. Marcus finished his sandwich. He looked out the windshield at the gas station canopy and the gray October sky above it, and the particular kind of ordinary Tuesday that had, in the space of one morning, become something entirely different. We're in Galloway, he said. The field was on the edge of a property that had once been a small commercial storage operation. A chain-link fence ran the perimeter. Beyond it, arranged in the particular chaotic patience of cars that had not moved in months, were 47 vehicles in various states of visible damage, oxidation, faded paint, flat tires, cracked windshields, and the general appearance of things that had given up. Zoe stood beside her father at the fence with her hands wrapped around the chain link, peering through at the rows with the evaluative gaze she had inherited from a man who looked at broken things and saw their before state. They're sad, she said. They're sleeping, Marcus said. He was already walking the fence line, looking at angles, reading roof lines and quarter panels from 30 feet out. A maroon early 2000s Ford F-250 with surface rust on the hood, but a body line that sat correctly, no major collision deformation. A dark green Lexus GS with what looked like hail damage across the hood and roof, but the frame geometry looked clean. A black Chevy Tahoe, all 4 tires flat, but flat in a matching way, not from damage, but from pure extended stillness. He pulled out his phone and started photographing through the fence gaps. Not randomly, systematically, section by section, the way you photograph a diagnostic sequence. He was building a map. Dad, Zoe said, are we going to buy all of them? I'm thinking about it. She was quiet for a moment. With what money? This was, objectively, the correct question. Marcus had $4,000, $200 in his savings account. That account was also supposed to cover December rent, Zoe's winter jacket replacement, and a crown on a back molar his dentist had been patient about for 3 months. Spending $3,000 of it on 47 cars that nobody else wanted was, by any conventional measure, exactly the kind of decision a responsible adult does not make. He called the county property office that afternoon. He got a clerk named Helen who had been answering phones there for 19 years and had the particular efficiency of someone who has been told the same questions so many times that she could answer them while doing something else entirely. The batch was being offered as a single lot. No individual splits. Titles would transfer with the sale, though 11 of the 47 carried salvage designations. The buyer was responsible for hauling. Cash or certified check only. First confirmed offer took the lot, no bidding. Has anyone made an offer? Marcus asked. Not yet, Helen said. Nobody's gone to look. I'll take it, Marcus said. Helen paused. For the first time in the conversation, she sounded as though she was doing only one thing. You haven't inspected the vehicles. I've inspected them enough, he said. I'll bring the check tomorrow morning. He hung up. He sat in the driver's seat of his truck in the parking lot of the Galloway County Courthouse and did the math out loud to no one in particular, which was a habit he had developed over years of fixing things that other people had declared unfixable. He said the numbers quietly, working through what he knew, what he estimated, what he believed. It took 11 minutes. Then he drove to the bank and withdrew $3,000 in certified check form, which left him $1,200 until his next paycheck, which was 15 days away, and which he was now mentally revising his December budget around with the calm efficiency of a man who had already decided the path. He picked Zoe up from school at 3:15. She looked at his face as she climbed into the truck and said, You did it, didn't you? It was not a question. I bought 47 cars today, he said. She buckled her seatbelt. She looked out the window. Then she said, in exactly the tone her father would have used, Okay, where do we start? Sal Greco showed up Saturday morning at 6:30 with his flatbed and a coffee thermos the size of a small fire extinguisher. He stood at the edge of the field looking at the rows of cars with the expression of a man trying to locate, amid a very complicated painting, the parts that made sense. Marcus, he said, I know. Some of these cars look like they were in small wars. Some of them were, Marcus said, but some of them are fine. Come on, I'll show you how to tell the difference. What followed was one of those rare things where a person's specific, accumulated, deeply personal expertise suddenly has a stage large enough to fill. Marcus walked Sal through the lot with the focused energy of someone who had been preparing for exactly this kind of problem without knowing it. He pointed at the Tahoe. 4 flat tires, but look at the frame rails. Clean. 0 collision deformation. Tires are $60 each. This truck is worth $12,000 retail once we put air in the wheels, detail the interior, and replace the battery. He pointed at the Lexus. Hail damage looks terrible. Hood and roof repaint runs about $1,800 at a mid-tier shop. But this is a GS 430 V8, low mileage if the odometer reads right, and that engine doesn't quit. Retail on a clean one is $15,000. We sell it as is with hail disclosure, and we still get 8-9. Sal was taking notes on his phone. He had stopped looking at the lot as a disaster and started looking at it the way Marcus was looking at it, as a series of solvable problems wearing the disguise of chaos. How many of these are real problems? Sal asked. 11, Marcus said. The 11 salvage titles. 8 of those are structural. I won't touch them. 3 of those are salvage only because of airbag deployment. No frame damage. Those 3 are fixable and retitleable in the right state. Sal stared at him. You figured all this out from the fence. I figured the framework from the fence, Marcus said. I confirmed it walking the lot yesterday afternoon. Helen from the county let me in for 2 hours. Who's Helen? Woman who answered the phone. She likes old cars. She had a '78 Firebird when she was 22. We talked for a while. This was the other thing about Marcus that nobody at the Ridgeline Gate had bothered to understand. He talked to everyone, not with the performing warmth of a salesman, but with the genuine interest of a man who believed that most people knew something he didn't, and that finding out what it was usually worth the conversation. They hauled the first 12 vehicles that weekend using Sal's flatbed in 3 trips. Marcus had negotiated temporary storage at a lot owned by a retired fleet manager named Gene, who had 7,000 square feet of covered bay space he wasn't using, and a borderline obsessive respect for anyone who took machines seriously. Gene charged Marcus nothing for the first month, on the condition that Marcus take a look at Gene's personal 1969 Camaro that had been sitting incomplete in the back of Bay 4 for 11 years. Marcus looked at the Camaro for 45 minutes. He wrote Gene a 3-page diagnostic note with part numbers, labor estimates, and a recommended sequence. Gene shook his hand and said the bay was his for as long as he needed it. The work started at 5 every weekday morning and went until Zoe needed to be at school. It resumed at 4 in the afternoon and ran until 8 or 9 at night. On weekends, it was essentially continuous with breaks for meals and the particular quality time that single parents learned to fold into margins. Homework at the workbench, dinner in the bay, Zoe doing her reading homework in the passenger seat of whatever car Marcus was running diagnostics on. She was not just present, she was useful. By the third weekend, she could read a battery voltage meter. By the fourth, she knew which sounds during a cold start meant normal warm-up behavior and which meant something worth noting. She kept a notebook that Marcus had given her, a black-cover composition book, in which she wrote the lot number of each vehicle, the date work started, the date it was ready, and a column she titled herself, "What Dad Said Was Wrong and What It Actually Was." This column was, without exception, the same answer in both fields. Marcus worked on the vehicles in order of resale potential, starting with the ones that needed the least intervention and could generate capital fastest. The Tahoe took one afternoon. New battery, for tires, a detail, a brake flush. He listed it on a regional dealer network site for $11,500 with a full mechanical disclosure. It sold in 4 days to a small lot owner in Columbus who had been looking for clean Tahoes for 3 weeks and called Marcus after driving it, the most honest seller he had dealt with all year. The Lexus took longer. The hail damage was cosmetically worse than Marcus had initially thought on the roof, and he made the call to repaint rather than disclose and discount because the math worked better and because he had a philosophy about presenting things at their actual value rather than their damaged surface value. The repaint cost him $2,100 at a shop whose owner owed Sal a favor. He listed the Lexus for $13,200. It sold in 8 days. The first month generated $64,000 in gross sales. After parts, paint, hauling, and fees, Marcus netted $41,000. He paid his December rent in the first week of November and bought Zoe the winter jacket in every color it came in, which was 3, because he had thought about the look on her face when he told her they might not be able to afford the one she wanted, and he was not prepared to see that look again. He called Sal from the bay on a cold Thursday night, both of them drinking coffee out of paper cups under Gene's fluorescent lights while a reassembled engine turned over for the first time, and he said very simply, "I think this is actually going to work." Sal looked at the engine, then at the $41,000 bank statement Marcus had photographed on his phone. Then he said, "Marcus, this already worked. What comes next is the other thing." The other thing was Carol Vane. She appeared by referral from the Columbus lot owner who had bought the Tahoe, a man named Dennis who had made a practice of telling other dealers about good sources the way some people recommend restaurants, with the evangelical certainty of someone who has been genuinely changed by a meal. He told Carol about Marcus the way he told people about the Tahoe, with specifics without embellishment. A mechanic who knew what he was selling, sold it accurately, and didn't waste anyone's time. Carol Vane was 56 years old and ran a private automotive brokerage that served a small and extremely specific clientele: collectors, estate liquidators, and high-net-worth buyers who wanted vehicles sourced without the theater of a public auction. She had 4 employees, 0 walk-in business, and a client list she referred to simply as the portfolio. She moved approximately $3 million in vehicles per year through relationships that had taken her a decade and a half to build. She drove to Gene's lot on a Wednesday afternoon in a slate-gray Mercedes and walked into Bay 3, where Marcus was elbow-deep in a 2004 Land Rover Discovery that he had identified, buried in the back corner of the Galloway field, as a potential sleeper, mechanically sound, body rough, but with an original interior in remarkable condition and a drivetrain he had initially dismissed until the compression test came back, so clean he had run it twice. She stood in the bay entrance and watched him work for 2 full minutes without announcing herself. Then she said, "The Land Rover. What do you think it's worth?" Marcus did not startle. He set down his wrench, turned around, and looked at her the way he looked at everything, steady and without performance. "Depends who's asking," he said. "To a retail buyer it's rough because the body says rough. To someone who knows Defenders and Discoveries, the engine and the interior are worth the bodywork required. Cleaned up and mechanically certified, it's worth $20,000 to $22,000 to the right collector." She walked into the bay. She looked at the engine bay he had open. "You're not wrong," she said. "I'm usually not," he said. Not arrogantly, just accurately. They talked for an hour and a half. She bought the Land Rover that day for $21,500. Then she sat in Jean's break room and looked at the inventory list Marcus had organized on a legal pad. 47 vehicles ranked by status, with notes on condition, completed work, and projected retail range. And she read every line with the focused patience of someone accustomed to documents that rewarded attention. "How are you selling the rest of these?" she asked. "Regional dealer boards. A few private listings." "You're leaving money on the table," she said, not unkindly. "The dealer boards get you the safe middle number. I can get you the high number on anything with collector appeal. I have buyers for the right vehicles who will pay a premium for access to inventory that hasn't been run through a public auction." Marcus looked at her. "What do you get out of it?" 12% commission on anything I place," she said. "You net more, I get my margin. The buyer gets a vehicle they couldn't have found otherwise. Nobody loses." He thought about it for 4 seconds, which was long enough. "Okay," he said. What Carol did over the following 8 weeks was, in professional terms, extraordinary. She didn't list the vehicles broadly. She matched each one with precision to a buyer already looking for something like it. The 2001 BMW M3 Marcus had resurrected from salvage only because of airbag deployment title. Repaired, recertified, mechanically flawless. Went to a collector in Pittsburgh who had been searching for an unmodified E46 M3 for 2 years. He paid $34,000 and called Carol afterward to thank her. The thanks extended to Marcus in the form of a referral to 2 more collectors who wanted similar sourcing. The 1999 Toyota Land Cruiser, bought as a non-runner, rebuilt at a cost of $4,400 in parts and 2 weeks of evenings. Sold through Carol's network to a buyer preparing for an overland expedition who needed mechanically bulletproof and didn't care about cosmetics. He paid $29,000. He also sent Marcus a handwritten note, which Marcus kept because he kept things that felt like they had been earned. By the end of month 3, the Galloway lot had generated $412,000 in combined gross sales. Marcus's net was $328,000 after all costs. Parts, labor he'd brought in for bodywork on 3 vehicles, hauling, storage, and Carol's commissions. He sat in the bay on a Sunday night with a legal pad and rewrote the number 3 times because writing it once felt too close to imagining it. $328,000. From $3,000 and 47 cars that a county clerk named Helen had been glad to be rid of. Zoe came into the bay at 9:15 to tell him it was past bedtime. She looked at the legal pad. She read the number. She was 9 years old, and she had been doing multiplication in school for 6 months. "Dad," she said carefully, "did you do the math right?" "I did," he said. She looked at the number one more time. Then she said, in a tone of complete composure, "Okay, I'm going to bed." She paused at the bay door. "But Dad, we should probably get a better truck." The word had a way of traveling in the automotive world the way all precise and useful information travels, through the exact people who needed to hear it, at the exact speed required to matter. Dealers who had bought from Marcus's regional listings told other dealers. Carol's clients mentioned his sourcing to their networks. Dennis in Columbus had been sending people Marcus's way with a consistency that was beginning to feel like a second job. By month 4, Marcus was not just selling the Galloway inventory. He was being contacted about other distressed lots. A storage facility in Akron with 31 abandoned vehicles. A fleet liquidation in Canton where a regional delivery company had dissolved and left 62 work trucks and vans with nowhere to go. A county over from Galloway, another impound lot backup that the county wanted cleared before winter. He didn't take everything. This was important. He looked at each opportunity the way he had looked at the Galloway fence, methodically, patiently, with the goal of knowing what was there before deciding whether it was worth knowing. He passed on the Akron lot because the vehicle condition on walkthrough was genuinely worse than the asking price could support profitably without capital he wasn't ready to deploy. He drove out, spent 90 minutes walking the rows, photographing things, running 3 compression checks on representative engines, and came to the conclusion in the parking lot that the math was backwards. The cost to bring those vehicles to a sellable standard exceeded what the vehicles would realistically return. He drove home without spending $1 and felt good about it. Knowing when not to buy was, he had decided, at least as important as knowing when to buy, and probably harder because the temptation to see potential everywhere once you've trained your eye to find it is a real and specific form of overconfidence that he had watched wreck better capitalized operations than his. He took the Canton fleet liquidation because commercial work trucks, properly certified, had a buyer pool he had come to understand deeply, and the price per vehicle was so far below actual value that the math was essentially doing itself. The company that had dissolved was a regional parcel delivery outfit that had over-leveraged in the wrong year and found itself, through no particular fault of its driver fleet, holding 62 work trucks and cargo vans that needed to be someone else's problem by the end of Q4 for tax purposes. The liquidator was not a vehicle person. He was an asset disposal specialist who thought about vehicles the way he thought about office furniture. Functionally interchangeable, valued by weight class and age, disposable at any price that got them off the books before December. Marcus walked the Canton fleet on a Tuesday morning with Sal and a mechanic he'd been working with named Kevin, 26 years old and recently out of a commercial fleet program, who had the specific quality of a person who had been trained correctly and had been underused at his previous position and was, consequently, hungry in the way that makes a person very good very fast. Kevin walked the rows beside Marcus and said almost nothing for the first hour. Then he stopped in front of a 2018 Ford Transit cargo van, looked at it, looked at Marcus, and said, "The coolant reservoir cap has been replaced recently. See how it's a different color than the housing?" Marcus looked. "What do you think it means?" "Could be nothing," Kevin said. "Could be they had an overheating event, and this is the only repair they made." "Let's find out," Marcus said. They found out. One of the 3 transits with mismatched components had a cooling system that had been patched rather than repaired after an overheat that had, based on the head gasket behavior Kevin identified in a careful cold start check, likely caused partial gasket failure. The other 2 were fine. Marcus flagged the damaged one for disclosure pricing and the other 2 for standard certification. He took all 62 vehicles at a price that amounted to roughly $600 per unit for anything over a 2015 model year. The Canton fleet, processed over 6 weeks with Kevin and Sal and 2 additional part-time mechanics Marcus brought in on a job basis, generated $940,000 in gross revenue. Commercial buyers came from 4 states, 2 regional delivery companies, 1 national logistics operator whose fleet manager called Marcus directly after seeing the certification documentation and said, with the practiced brevity of a man who had been lied to by too many sellers, "These trucks are actually what you said they were." Marcus said they were. The fleet manager bought 14 of them. Kevin asked, in week 4 of the Canton work, whether there was a permanent position available. Marcus looked at his work, which spoke for itself, and said yes. He was starting to understand what he was building. Not just a vehicle operation, but a specific kind of reputation. The reputation of a person whose word was the same as the paperwork, whose disclosed conditions were accurate, whose certified vehicles were genuinely certified. In a market full of motivated optimism about vehicle conditions, this was not a common commodity. It turned out to be worth more per unit than any single mechanical improvement Marcus could have made, because it created buyers who came back, and buyers who came back brought people they knew, and the referral network that built around Marcus's reputation grew faster and more organically than any marketing he could have designed. Sal's flatbed became a full-time operation. Marcus brought him on properly, with a real arrangement and a real cut, because Sal had been showing up at 6 in the morning for months, and Marcus had a specific and immovable principle about people who showed up being compensated for it. Jean's storage became the first of 3 facilities. Marcus rented base space from 2 additional shops whose owners, after meeting him, tended to become enthusiastic participants in something that felt less like commerce and more like a very well-organized rescue operation. He hired a detailer named Ramon who had run his own mobile detail service for years with a client list that spoke for itself and a meticulous standard that matched Marcus's own. He brought in a part-time bookkeeper named Patricia who had 20 years of small business accounting experience and who reorganized Marcus's legal pad system into something that produced real financial statements, tax-ready and clean. She also reorganized Jean's break room filing cabinet without being asked because she found disorder genuinely distressing and because the filing cabinet was genuinely distressing. By month 6, Marcus Cole's operation, which did not yet have a formal name, but which everyone in the regional dealer network was referring to informally as the Cole lots, had processed 143 vehicles across 4 source lots. Gross revenue, $2,100,000. Net profit, $1,680,000. He took Zoe to dinner at a restaurant that had cloth napkins. She was very formal about it. She ordered from the menu without asking what things cost, which was a behavior he had told her once, very carefully, she would be allowed to do when the business was real. She had remembered this. She ordered the salmon. He ordered the same thing. He looked at his daughter across the table, under the warm light of a place that had been beyond their budget a year ago, and she looked back at him with her mother's eyes and his particular expression, calm and certain and a little private, and neither of them said anything for a long moment. "Are you happy, Dad?" she asked. He thought about it honestly. "Yet," he said, "I think this is what happy feels like. I may have forgotten." She considered this. "That's okay," she said. "You remembered." Bobby Fitch found out in November, which meant he found out about 2 months later than everyone else in the regional dealer network had quietly registered the name Marcus Cole. This was unusual for Bobby, who prided himself on knowing everything before he needed to know it. The delay said something about the specific type of blindness that comfort produces in even intelligent people. The way a man can walk past the same door for 20 years and never try the handle because the door doesn't look like the kind that opens. Bobby was the most prominent dealer in the Ridgeline network, a man who moved 600 to 800 vehicles per year through relationships he had been building since the late 90s, who wore the same brand of expensive work boots every day, who talked at every volume except quiet, and who had a standing Thursday lunch with Ridgeline's director, Diane Pratt, at which the general state of the regional market was discussed as though they were 2 heads of state reviewing a shared kingdom. Bobby had been at Ridgeline so long that his parking spot was informally understood to be his parking spot. The young dealers who came through gave him a wide berth and a specific kind of deference that is extended to people who seem to have always been the biggest thing in the room. He was also, if you watch carefully, a man whose particular brand of dominance required things to stay the way they were. The market as he knew it, the sourcing channels as he understood them, the invisible hierarchy of the registration line and the coffee area and the auction floor, which Bobby moved through with the casual ease of a man who had never once questioned whether the rules of this world applied to him. They did. He had helped write them in the informal way that people write the rules of environments they have occupied long enough to shape. His first indication came from a dealer named Terrence who operated 2 lots in Northeast Ohio. Terrence mentioned at a casual lunch in late October that he had sourced 4 certified fleet trucks from a private seller. The trucks were the best documented, most accurately represented commercial vehicles Terrence had seen at any price point in the regional market in years. He had bought all 4 before he finished the walk-around on the 3rd one. The seller had handed him a 4-page mechanical disclosure and a certification summary and answered every question Terrence asked without looking at the ceiling once, which Terrence noted because he had been buying vehicles from sellers who looked at the ceiling for 23 years and had come to regard it as the universal body language of optimistic fabrication. Bobby had filed it under probably nothing for 2 weeks. The category probably nothing in Bobby's operational vocabulary had historically been quite reliable. This was the first time in a long time it had misfired. By the second Thursday lunch with Diane, the name Marcus Cole had come up in 4 separate conversations, through 4 separate channels, from 4 separate people who had either bought from him or bought from someone who had. A dealer up in Canton had mentioned buying 2 fleet trucks that were noticeably better priced and better conditioned than the same vehicles he'd seen at Ridgeline recently. He'd bought them from a guy operating out of multiple bays in 3 counties, former fleet mechanic, no dealer license, selling through private network, and a broker named Carol Vane. Bobby set down his fork. No dealer license, he said. Not currently. He's operating through individual title transfers, fully legal. Carol's handling the brokerage compliance on the collector sales. Bobby was quiet for a moment. Then he asked the question that told the room exactly what he was actually worried about. What's his volume? When the number came back, approximate, sourced through 3 separate conversations in the dealer community, and climbing, Bobby's expression did its own very private thing. Not panic. Bobby was too experienced for panic. It was more like the expression of a man who has been sitting in what he believed was the front row and has just noticed, with a certain queasy clarity, that someone built a stage behind him when he wasn't looking. He asked Diane about it that same afternoon. He phrased it carefully, the way people phrase things when they're trying not to sound as rattled as they feel. I just want to understand the full picture, he said, which was how Bobby talked when he actually meant, I need to understand why I didn't see this coming and also possibly what I should do about it. Diane Pratt had been running Ridgeline for 11 years. She was 60 years old, had built the lot from a regional footnote to the most active dealer auction in the tri-state area, and had the specific and hard-won quality of someone who had made every kind of mistake already and didn't need to make them twice. She listened to Bobby describe the Cole operation with the focused patience she brought to all things. Marcus Cole, she said when he finished. You know him? I know of him, she said. His application came across my desk. Ted at the gate said, not a fit. He's done over $1 million net in 6 months, Bobby said. Diane looked out her office window at the Ridgeline lot below. 411 vehicles in neat rows, the organized machinery of a business she had built deliberately over a decade. She thought about the application. She thought about Ted's 3 words. Set up a meeting, she said. The meeting request came through Carol, who called Marcus on a Thursday morning while he was under the front end of a 2005 Dodge Ram at Jeans Bay. Ridgeline wants to sit down with you, Carol said. Ridgeline, Marcus repeated. Diane Pratt herself. She's requesting a meeting at your convenience. Marcus was quiet for 5 seconds. In those 5 seconds, he thought about a Tuesday morning in October, a gate, a man named Ted, and 3 words delivered with the particular ease of someone who has never once been on the receiving end of them. He thought about Zoe asleep in the passenger seat. He thought about the $43 in his wallet. Tell her I'm available next Thursday, he said. She's welcome to come here. A pause. To Jean's lot. To Jean's lot, he said. I'll be in the bay. He could hear Carol almost smiling on the other end. I'll pass it along, she said. Diane Pratt arrived at Jean's lot on a Thursday morning in a company car, driven by an associate. She was not what Marcus had expected, which was his own failure of preparation, because he had pictured someone like Bobby Fitch in better shoes. What he got was a woman who walked into the bay, looked at the operation he had running across 3 active bays and 2 storage areas, and spent 8 minutes in complete silence before she said anything. What she said was, "This is good work." Not a compliment with an angle behind it, just an accurate statement delivered plainly by someone who knew the difference. "Thank you," Marcus said. "I want to offer you a formal relationship with Ridgeline," she said. "Vendor access, lot rights, dealer network integration. You'd be able to source through our auctions, sell through our network, access the buyer database." She named the terms. They were genuinely good terms, the kind that represented Ridgeline's actual recognition of what the Cole lots had become. Marcus wiped his hands on a shop rag. He looked at Diane Pratt. He thought, very briefly, about what he was going to say. "I appreciate the offer," he said. "My answer is no." Diane did not react with visible surprise, which told him she had considered this possibility. "Why?" she said. "Because I built this without your gates," he said. "Not out of spite. Just because I know now that the gates weren't the point. The work was the point." What I've built works on its own terms, and bringing it inside your structure means operating on your terms, which may be good terms, but they're not mine." He paused. "What I'll offer you is this: mutual referral. I'll send you buyers who are looking for volume and auction-based sourcing. You send me sellers with distressed lots that your network doesn't want to touch. Nobody owns anybody. We both make more money." Diane considered this for a long moment. "That's not how we normally do business," she said. "I know," he said, "but you drove out here, which tells me you're open to how I do it." She held his gaze. Then something in her expression settled, the particular settling of someone who has just found the version of a deal that is actually worth making. "Mutual referral," she said. "Quarterly review of the arrangement." "Quarterly review," he agreed. They shook hands in the bay under Jean's fluorescent lights, next to a 2006 GMC Sierra that was going to be worth $16,000 in about 10 days, over the quiet conversation of engines that someone finally understood. By the end of month 8, the coal lots had cleared 211 vehicles across 6 source lots. By month 10, they had crossed $4 million in gross revenue. Carol's network accounted for 30% of sales by volume and 62% by value. The high-end collector placements, the estate vehicles, the things that Carol matched to buyers the way a librarian matches a reader to a book that was already waiting for them. The milestone that Marcus wrote down and kept was not the 4 million or the 5 million or the number Patricia had projected by year-end. It was a Saturday afternoon in January when Zoe came into the bay holding her composition book and announced that she had categorized every vehicle by problem type and built a chart showing which category had the highest profit margin per hour of labor invested. He looked at her chart for a long time. "What does it say?" he asked. "Electrical problems," she said. "Everyone thinks electrical is the worst. But the parts are cheap and you know how to fix them faster than anyone. So the margin is the highest." He took the composition book from her. He looked at the chart. She had drawn it in red pen with a ruler, labeled in her careful block handwriting, and it was correct. It was more than correct. It was the kind of insight that would have taken a business consultant 3 weeks to produce, delivered by his 9-year-old daughter on a Saturday afternoon, because she had been paying attention. "You," he said carefully, "are going to be terrifying when you grow up." She considered this. "Good," she said. He framed the chart. It went on the wall of the bay between a laminated wiring diagram and a photograph of Dina taken at a beach in 2013, laughing at something off camera, caught in a moment of pure and ordinary happiness. He put Zoe's chart next to Dina's photograph because both of them belonged there, because this whole thing, every car, every early morning, every engine turned over in the dark, had been for both of them in ways that were too layered to explain simply and too real to leave unacknowledged. The $9 million number arrived the way all large numbers do when they've been built correctly, not as a single transaction, but as the sum of everything accumulated honestly, one solved problem at a time. Patricia prepared the 12-month report in a green folder with Marcus's name on the cover. She sat on Jean's workbench on a Wednesday morning in October, exactly 1 year after the Tuesday Marcus had driven to Ridgeline in the dark with his iron shirt and his $43. Gross revenue, $9,214,000. Net profit, $7,160,000. 3 source partnerships. Formal agreements with 2 regional auction houses including, through the mutual referral arrangement, Ridgeline. A collector-brokered relationship with Carol Vane that had placed 41 vehicles into private hands at premium prices. Sal's hauling operation, now 3 flatbeds and 2 drivers. Ramon's detail team, for people. Patricia's books, immaculate. Marcus read the report, standing up. He did not sit down to read it, which was not dramatic. It was just that he had been standing at workbenches for 38 years, and this was where he thought best. He read every page. He noted Patricia's margin analysis on page 7. He noted the Q4 projection on page 12. Then he set the folder down, picked up his coffee, and looked at the bay around him. The organized tools on their hooks, the clean floor, the cars in their various states of becoming something better than what they'd been, and the photograph and the chart side by side on the wall. He thought about Ted at the gate. He thought about the words, "not a fit," delivered to a man with a sleeping child in his truck, and a specific and irreplaceable knowledge that nobody at that gate had bothered to ask about. He did not feel vindicated in the hot way. He felt something quieter and more permanent than that. He felt like himself, recognized, finally, in territory he had built with his own hands from a $3,000 bet on 47 sleeping machines. Sal appeared in the bay entrance with his coffee thermos and the expression of a man who has been told a number and is still processing it. 9 million, Sal said. 9.2, Marcus said. Sal was quiet for a full 10 seconds. Then he said, I am buying the coffee for the rest of my life. I'm putting in the contract. Effective immediately. You don't have to do that. I know, Sal said. That's why I'm doing it. Zoe turned 10 the following March. She asked for one specific thing, to go back to Ridgeline on the first Saturday of the month, when the public walkthrough was open, and look at the cars on the lot. Marcus drove her there in the new truck, a 2022 F-250, clean and dark blue, with a dashboard that didn't have a single crack in it. He pulled into the visitor parking without checking whether it was the right lot or the wrong one. He took Zoe's hand and they walked through the gate. Ted was not there that morning. The gate was staffed by a young woman named Jamie who handed them visitor passes with the practiced warmth of someone who greeted people correctly. They walked the lot together, the way they had walked the Galloway fence 2 Octobers ago, father and daughter, reading roof lines and panel lines and the posture of machines the way other people read landscapes. Zoe had her notebook. She wrote things down. She asked questions that were better than some questions Marcus had heard from professional mechanics. They stayed for 2 hours. When they got back to the truck, Zoe sat in the passenger seat and looked out the windshield at the rows of vehicles they had just walked through and said nothing for a moment. Dad, she said finally, did you want to come back here? To prove something. Marcus started the engine. He thought about it honestly, the way she always asked him to think about things. Maybe a little, he said, but mostly I came back because this is where it started. And I wanted you to see that where things start isn't where they end. She nodded. She opened her notebook to a fresh page. At the top she wrote, in her careful block letters, what Dad said. She wrote the sentence underneath it. Then she closed the book and put in her backpack and looked out the window as they pulled out of the Ridgeline lot onto the wide October road. The engine running clean and even the way all engines do when someone has taken the time to understand them. If this story stayed with you, if you've ever been told you weren't a fit for something that fit you perfectly, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button below. There's more where this came from, and every single story is one nobody thought was worth telling until it turned out to be the only one worth hearing.